Welcome to the NFP Podcast, where we explore the empowering world of natural family planning. I'm Amy Smith. Join me and my co-host Emily Appledorn each week. Together, we're here to dive deep into the science, the stories, and the spirituality behind NFP. Every week, we push back against the free love culture and advocate for a culture of responsible love, where intentionality and respect are at the forefront of family planning. Join us as we discuss everything from the practicalities of charting and fertility awareness to the profound impact NFP can have on relationships and communities. Whether you're new to NFP or a seasoned pro, our podcast is your go-to resource for honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life experiences. So grab a friend, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the NFP Podcast. You're in. All right. Welcome back to the podcast, guys. So today,
Welcome back.
yes, Emily and I are going to talk about NFP effectiveness, and kind of dispel, some different myths or try to explain some things. So when we talk about a method effectiveness, so a family planning method of effectiveness, there's kind of an infamous PDF, and I'll link it in the show notes. That's from the CDC, and it's the effectiveness of family planning methods. And it's a chart, and it ranks methods according to their effectiveness rate, with the most effective, and this is for avoiding a pregnancy. The most effective are at the top, and the least effective are at the bottom. And so what you see on this is that things like the implant or the IUD or female or male sterilization, like tubal ligation or vasectomies, have quote unquote a high effectiveness rating, meaning that they're considered very effective in that when a couple has a random, over the course of a year, couples engaging in random acts of intercourse with using these methods are likely, there's less than a one pregnancy per year out of 100 women. One pregnancy a year out of 100 women who have one of these methods, right? Who are having random acts of intercourse. And then it goes down from there. So then the next one would be using things like an injectable or a pill or a patch or a ring or a diaphragm. And that would lead to, when they've looked at all those different methods, and they each have different effectiveness methods, right? But lumped together, we're looking at anywhere from 6 to 12 unexpected pregnancies per 100 women over the course of a year. Again, of just kind of random acts of intercourse. These are how many pregnancies you can expect. Then you go down from there and you've got things like the condom or the withdrawal method, right? Where a man would kind of withdraw from the act of intercourse before he ejaculates. And with those methods, you're looking at more like 18 or more pregnancies over the course of a year per 100 women. Okay. Now, the one that is ranked really as one of the least effective methods, according to the CDC on this chart, is the fertility awareness method. And those are what we, NFP methods, natural family planning methods, and things like a spermicide, which is like a gel that's supposed to kill sperm during acts of intercourse. So on this chart, we're going to hone in on the NFP effectiveness method. And then I just kind of want to rant a little bit about one of my pet peeves with the other effectiveness methods and the way that they're measured. So the fertility awareness-based method effectiveness, which is about, on here it says it's 24%, meaning that out of 100 women over the course of a year, random acts of intercourse, you're likely to get 24 pregnancies that are not intended by using these methods. So one of the falls, how did they get this number? One of the faults with this number is that it is a pooled number. And basically there was a questionnaire that said, what method do you use? And did you get pregnant while using this method? So there was no specificity of, did you use a symptothermal method? Did you use the Creighton model method? Did you use, help me, Emily, did you use the Marquette? Thank you. The Marquette method. Did you use the rhythm method? Did you just guess? Like, what, did you just count? Did you use an app? Like, what did you use? Okay. All of these people answered this survey, and then they pooled their answers and they got this. So they said all fertility awareness-based methods have this effectiveness rate, which is obviously wrong. And that's the main point I want to bring to your attention here, is that this is not correct. Now, the others, I would say, are also not accurate or correct. And this is because, this is what I think anyway, this is because, like the condom, like the pill, like the IUD, etc. Well, for one thing, things like the method, like the IUD or the pill, these methods are considered abortifacient. So they're not true contraceptive methods. That's why we like to use the term birth control, because they control a live birth from resulting from that active intercourse, but they don't necessarily control the conception of a human being from that active intercourse, because they have underlying mechanisms of action that maybe don't prevent conception all the time. They don't prevent ovulation all the time, but then their other underlying mechanisms prevent the baby from attaching to the uterine lining, because as we've talked about before in previous episodes, conception happens in the fallopian tube and then the baby implants, so in the uterine wall. So during that time, these devices, these methods have other mechanisms of action to try to counteract that baby form, growing into the and attaching to the uterine lining. So that's one thing. So it's giving kind of a false idea of how many conceptions are actually taking place. We don't know. So we don't know how many conceptions are actually taking place with some of these methods. The other thing, and this is my biggest pet peeve with the condom in particular, and I guess with a lot of these methods too, is we now know, right, based on our understanding of human physiology, we know you can't get pregnant at every time. Every active intercourse we know cannot result in conception because you're just not fertile, right? Because you don't have cervical mucus, sperm are dying because of the acidic environment of the vaginal canal. Like, we just know that not every active intercourse is going to lead to conception into a pregnancy. So you're kind of not giving credit where credit is due, because a lot of the credit for not conceiving just goes to the natural cycle, the rhythm of the natural cycle. This is how your body works. I don't care if you were having intercourse at every hour on the hour for an entire day. If you are not fertile that day, you are not getting pregnant. So if you put a condom on and you have intercourse, it's not the condom that kept you from getting pregnant. It's the fact that you're not able to get pregnant because you're not fertile. So when condoms have these effectiveness rates, you just wonder, like, well, is it the condom that kept you from being pregnant? Or is it the fact that you just couldn't get pregnant because you're not fertile? And of course, when they do research on condoms, like, they don't do targeted research. It's very interesting, actually, when you look at condom use in couples. There's a very interesting study done. I'll have to look at it. I'll try to look for it and link in the show notes. There's a really interesting study done I saw a long time ago. I don't know if you're familiar with this one, Emily, but they were following a couple that was using a fertility awareness method, and they used condoms to try to avoid during the fertile window. The couples that did that, though, Emily, they're very smart. They only engaged in intercourse at the tail ends of the fertility window with a condom. So when they first started to see, like, their sticky, tacky, cloudy type of, like, right when fertility turned on, they would have like 1 or 2 days of intercourse with a condom. And then at the very end, right, like after they saw their mucus go away, they would have like 1 or 2 days of intercourse with a condom before they went back to having intercourse without any type of barrier method. So no one ever used like the stretchy, clear, lubricative, egg white type mucus days to engage in intercourse even with a condom, because they didn't know the effectiveness rate of that condom, and they knew that they were very fertile. And their goal is to try to avoid a pregnancy. So I feel like, how smart, right? Like, see, people are smart.
That's fascinating.
It's
Yeah.
interesting, like, just the human behavior aspect of that.
Right. It's not
So
surprising.
jump in here. So these are kind of just, I wanted to really focus on that. Like, how did they get that effectiveness rate for fertility awareness? And then we'll go through like actual method effectiveness rates of the different methods of fertility awareness or of NFP. I guess the last thing I'll say too is, And we'll talk about this when we go through the methods of NFP effectiveness, because I think it relates more to that. So any idea or any thoughts, Emily, about anything with this CDC kind of chart about effectiveness rates?
I'm so glad you broke it down, because honestly, this is the first time I'm seeing this specific chart, and I can tell immediately it's very misleading. And so that's really great to have somebody interpret it for you. So that's great.
I think when I first learned this, I was at like a speaker. It was like a speaker training, I think. And when a doctor was going through this chart, and she was explaining that to me of what the fertility awareness method kind of compilation, that it was just kind of a compilation of people being asked, what method did you use? And then all being lumped together to give this one method effectiveness rate. So yeah. So anyway, we know that that is not the effectiveness rates of all the family planning methods that are evidence-based that we know that are out there. Okay, so let's talk about method effectiveness for NFP methods. Now, we can go through each of the different ones, but let's just start, I think, with our basic. Let's start with what is that called? Like trying to paint context, or like starting on like a common ground. Oftentimes this is just human behavior. We know this about human health behavior choices, right? Is that I will ask a friend, like a close friend, so what are you guys doing for, family planning? Saying this is like a Christian context. They're not sure. Do we use birth control? Do we not use birth control? Is that okay? Is that not okay? What do we do? So I ask a friend. We're really trying to avoid, right? And I ask, so what are you guys doing? Well, she shares that, they were using this family planning method, this NFP method, and it just did not work. They were trying to avoid pregnancy, and they got pregnant 3 times in a row. And her friend's like, oh my gosh, wow. And so in her mind, right, then what happens is NFP is not effective. Now, what she should have done, but she didn't, because this is just not how normal friend conversations would go, right? I would have followed up with like, so how good were you at charting and tracking? What were you charting and tracking? Were you working with a teacher when you were using this method? Were you just using an app on your phone? Like, what did that look like, And this isn't to accuse her of saying that she was doing anything wrong necessarily, but it's to gain more information and more insight, right, Emily? Because I have to be clear with people when I'm using NFP. I was using NFP to achieve a pregnancy, and it wasn't happening for a long time. So I could say NFP is ineffective in that regard. Like, you have to be very clear. In a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is, before you judge, you can't judge a book by its cover, but you can't judge a method by the users necessarily. You need to look at the method effectiveness and then factor in like typical use too. How are people typically using, and how motivated are they at achieving whatever goal they're trying to achieve? Like couples who are highly motivated to avoid a pregnancy and use an NFP method according to the guidelines that it's established, right? The evidence that's been used to establish the practice of using the method to avoid a pregnancy, they have over 95% effectiveness at avoiding a pregnancy when used appropriately. Right, Emily? Like, you have to max like motivation, intention, and method use. This is so important, because some couples will say, yeah, we really want to avoid a pregnancy. And you're having intercourse on days that are really fertile. Like, and you know that? Yeah, we know. And I had these conversations over and over and over again with so many couples, right, Emily? Like, you know that you are fertile and you are choosing to engage in that. Yeah, we know. And you're telling me you don't want to get pregnant. Yeah, we just really, yeah, we just don't want to avoid. I'm like, okay, as long as I just tried to always make sure like you know what you are doing. And maybe some of it was like very self-conscious too. I didn't want you to like go out and then tell people this didn't work, because it's like, it does work. You're just saying you don't want to have a baby, but then you're having intercourse when you're fertile.
Well, oh man, I agree with all of this, especially on the teaching side. There's a fine line between, when you're in a public conversation. This has happened to me, so I would never do this, by the way. But I wouldn't there, HIPAA is a real thing in my opinion, and I'm not going to stand there and out someone because I do know the behavior, or I do know um the behavior really because perhaps I was their teacher, and so I it really I've actually talked to my husband Josh about this, like, because it kind of bothers me. I've heard this more than once, like, well, that didn't work for me. So, and I I thought that they knew why it didn't work for them in regards to avoiding pregnancy. So, so whenever I hear people say that didn't work for me, and then knowing their intentions and also knowing their behavior, it didn't work because of intercourse on fertile days. That's hard for me, because I want people to know how it really works, but I also would never, never publicly say to anyone, well, that didn't work because X, Y, and Z, So, so that is hard. And I'm coming at it from a point of, for the majority of my life, I've used it to achieve pregnancy when I've been using it. So, so I realize that everybody's circumstance is different, and just like infertility is a cross, sometimes fertility is a cross, and it doesn't matter as a couple, in my experience, what your situation is, whether it's easier for you to achieve or harder to avoid. If you're trying to live your faith, you're gonna be faced with hard times and hard choices, and so I don't want to downplay that for anyone either, just because I haven't been on that side of it. So yeah.
So everything I did like ditto. I wouldn't oust someone, right then and there.
Right.
But I
Right.
just think it's really important, for people who are listening, who are curious about NFP, they're curious about how effective it really is, for them to really understand kind of how effectiveness rates when they hear things from their doctors. Oh, that's not effective.
Oh,
That's not true.
yeah.
I mean, we know. So what does it mean when we say NFP, the effectiveness of NFP? It is the effectiveness of how we understand the body. And we know that we are very confident in our understanding of human physiology and our reproductive system at this point in time, matched with our intention and our behavior. So we've got two elements, right, with NFP. It's our knowledge and then our behavior and our intentions. And when you're out in the world and you're asking people about methods they use, and if they say NFP and they say, oh, it doesn't work, we just kept getting pregnant, please remember to kind of fact check them. And you don't have to ask them if you don't feel comfortable, right? Because again, we don't want to make someone feel really bad. Like, well, actually it does work. You just didn't chart well. Which could very well been that could have very well been it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just were kind of lazy at charting, which is fine. I'm kind of lazy at charting. This is the whole thing. It's not I am not shaming anyone. I just be
No.
intellectually honest, okay? It's not the
Yes.
method that didn't work. You just weren't charting well.
Mhm.
And that's okay. Just say that, and that
Mhm.
is a cross part of it, Emily. Sometimes it is tiring. I just want to go to the bathroom. I don't want to have to think about this. Or I'm tired. I don't want to pick up my phone and log this in. And you can say that with any behavior, right? I'm tired. I'm just going to
Absolutely.
go to McDonald's. I don't want to go home and fry up
Mm.
some ground beef and make rice and have a healthy,
Right.
you could do that with anything. So it's
Mhm.
fine. People do that with family planning. What makes family planning so different? Human life can result from that.
Yeah.
And people
Yeah.
know that that's very demanding and takes a lot of
Mhm.
responsibility. And
Mhm.
that's hard. So I feel like that's why, people will say oh, why is it that men would never go to some of the extremes that women go to avoid a pregnancy?
Mhm.
Because women feel the weight of
Mhm.
childbearing and child rearing more intensely than men do, physically, emotionally, mentally. And so I think because of that, you recognize like they're just more willing to do these things to their body to try to avoid that rather than bearing the cross of having to just be accountable, check these signs, have conversations with my spouse, make tough choices, deny
Mhm.
myself and my desires sometimes for intercourse. Like all those things. Definitely, I'm not saying they're easy, but I am saying you can't blame the effectiveness of a method based on like all those human factors that I'm talking about.
You know, all of that is true. And there is another factor that we haven't talked about, which is what the woman's body is doing that or not doing that is making it maybe harder to understand what her chart is doing. So while she may have the behavior of and the intention and the discipline of charting and wanting to avoid pregnancy and that sort of thing, I'm thinking about another situation where I have heard that didn't work for me again, but they weren't talking about it in the sense of how they were making their observations. They were talking about it in the sense of my body was doing something and that didn't work for me because I was having a hard time interpreting what my body was doing. Now, to add to that, you want to make sure that you're working with the teacher because the teacher should be able to help you interpret when you're fertile and when you're not. And we've talked about this on previous episodes. Some women's window of fertility does look longer than other women. And that can be harder for couples that are trying to avoid. And so that doesn't feel like that works for them in the sense of perhaps maybe their desires as a couple in comparison to their desire to avoid pregnancy. So I do think about certain situations where that gets said. I also think about there are different methods that are not intended to be used at different points in our lives. So whether that's a postpartum time, and in certain time or somebody struggling with infertility, these methods are not meant to be effective. And so they're not meant to be effective in help with monitoring that part of your fertility. There is a high rate of, for lack of a better word, confusion that can occur. And so it is really important to know your method and know, is this a good method for me at this point in my life? Is this a method that can help me with my fertility right now, and give me the accurate information that I'm looking for in order to meet my intentions?
Yes, really good point, Emily. Really good point. You've got to find one that's going to fit you, your body,
Mhm.
and the season of life that you're in. And
Mhm.
remember, these methods, right, these NFP methods are based on the biological markers that your body produces. So if something is off in your cycle that is confusing you and not allowing you to accurately interpret one of your biological markers, then maybe there's an underlying cause that's contributing to that, right? Like something is happening that's really messing with my cervical fluid. It's either making it not present, right? I'm not having cervical fluid. I'm having a lot of cervical fluid all the time. Like there are reasons that that might be the case. And those reasons can be identified and addressed and cleared up so that way you can use that method and have those more effective results. So also, and remembering there too that there are two different type of effectiveness rates. There's perfect use, like we're following it to a T, we're identifying all the biological markers, we followed the parameters set by whatever the protocol is of each method, like the Billings method or the Creighton model method. The effectiveness of like the method itself, I mean, these effectiveness rates range from like 95 to 99% effective at trying to avoid a pregnancy. Have the
Yes.
effectiveness rates of like typical use. And that's everything that Emily and I have just been talking about, right? Which is like, yeah, we want to avoid, but we were just really in the mood and we decided to have intercourse despite the
Yeah.
fact that like we saw egg white mucus. Like, okay, as long as that was an informed act of intercourse, right? But when you're when you're looking at the method effect, then though that begs the question, like, so that pregnancy that resulted from that, You told the questionnaire that you were using the Creighton model. You were trying to avoid a pregnancy and you got pregnant. But you failed to mention, because they failed to ask, that
Right.
you chose to engage in that act of intercourse knowing that it was a fertile day and a pregnancy resulted. Even though you didn't want to get pregnant, you still made that choice. That is huge, Emily. That is like,
That is huge.
that is like, neon flashing sign of like, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't count this person
Right.
when we're trying to measure the effectiveness of this method, because even though they say their intention was to avoid, they literally chose to do that anyway. And so now that kind of counts, quote unquote, against the method and their effectiveness rate as saying it wasn't as effective. Whereas something like the pill, right? So then we have that same couple and they're using the pill to avoid a pregnancy. Well, first of all, the pill just shuts down it just hijacks the fertility system, like the reproductive system altogether, right? So it takes over. It tries to take over. It pumps your body full of synthetic hormones. It tries to stop ovulation. Like it gives you this, illusion of having a period every month by giving you this synthetic withdrawal bleed. And then you can, then that same person who's trying to avoid and they have intercourse whenever they want to have intercourse and they don't get pregnant, well, then that method is like so effective. It's like, but it's not really even proof of like the body. It's, of course, the method's effective because that pill just like shut down the system. Like you can't get pregnant because the system is shut down, And in cases when it, quote unquote, doesn't, I was going to say fail, but when it doesn't work well or when you get pregnant, like, well, it just wasn't as effective of shutting down the system. So anyway, just to keep that in mind too, when you're looking at NFP methods and it says the effectiveness of like typical use, that typical use doesn't mean that's going to be your typical use, okay?
Correct.
Your typical use could still be 98, 99% effective because when you're trying to avoid, you and your spouse, if you have the desire to have intercourse and you're fertile, you look at each other and you say, do we really want to have intercourse right now or do we want to wait a couple of days? And if you say, we're just going to wait a couple of days, then you're not going to get pregnant. Does that make sense? You know what I mean, Emily? So that is something when you're looking at numbers, think of all that goes into that number. So when you see the method effectiveness rate is 99, the typical use effectiveness rate is 83. Why? Because of that scenario, because of the couple who was questioned. What method are you using? I'm using this method. Did you get pregnant? Yes, I got pregnant. Method doesn't work. No, you knew you were fertile and you engaged in intercourse, even though you didn't want to get pregnant. Like there was a big cognitive dissonance there. Like, I don't want to get pregnant, but I really want to have intercourse. You just chose to have intercourse. Like, I'm not shaming you. Just, you made that decision. Don't blame the method.
Right. And there's so many methods out there that look at so many different biomarkers. And so if it's hard to manage one of those biomarkers in a certain method that you're using, there are other options. So try something else if it feels like what you're using is not working for you.
Amen.
Because there might be a better method for you.
Yes. I'm going to also attach a little PDF about what fertility awareness-based methods are, and it has a great chart of their effectiveness rates. So you can actually see like what is the method effectiveness rate and what is the use effectiveness rate. And hopefully now when you look at all these effectiveness rates, Emily and I just really want your brain to be thinking differently, be thinking what went into, how did they measure this effectiveness rate? What does this method do? How is it used? Thinking of users, all of that. And while we love our friends' experience with the method, and I live off of that. I am the same person that everyone else is, right? Like when I am looking for a supplement to give my kids, I don't go to the CDC website to look up what they recommend. I go to my friend who is just as crunchy as I am, and I say, what do you give your kids to help build their immune system in the winter to prevent sickness? Like, that's what I do. And
I literally give them what you told me to give them 5 years ago.
Right. Like that's what I do. And I don't check like, I don't cross check her recommendation with any type of evidence. I just am like, okay, I trust my friend. Her kids are healthy. I'm going to go with what she does. Like until told otherwise, until something changes. So I think it's just let's just all be as intellectually honest and, humble as we possibly can in this area, and say that
Definitely.
there are a lot of things that go into effectiveness rates, and that we need to just keep kind of that open mind and that honest perspective when we're making a choice, and take our friend's experience as, with whatever weight you want, a grain of salt or, a pound of manure. I don't even know. It's like, you can take it with however much you want to weigh it. Right. Thank you, Emily. That's more perfect. So yeah. So anyway, I think those are kind of the big things I wanted to mention. I'll list I'll link to the CDC thing that Emily and I were talking about. I'll also link to this other fertility awareness effectiveness chart that's really great and gives you the names of all the different methods, so you can research them and go to the method website. And my hope is that we're going to have on some guests from each of these different methods to kind of explain the method and how they came up. So I have to contact some other people. We will be able to interview my old boss, actually, Dr. Marguerite Duane. She's going to come on and just kind of give a general overview of what fertility awareness methods are, like what the NFP methods are, and how they work, kind of give us some insight into the medical community and our experiences with doctors. And yeah, so anyway, I'm looking forward. So be on the lookout for that interview in the next couple of weeks. Anything else, Emily, you wanted to say about effectiveness?
No, I think I feel like I'm hopeful it's very helpful for women and couples.
I hope so too. Okay. All right, guys. So we will see you next week. Bye, Emily.
Bye-bye.
That wraps up another episode of the NFP Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Please connect with us by sending us an email with your questions and stories to thenfpshow@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with more insights, tips, and heartfelt conversations about natural family planning. Until then, love responsibly.